I am Shyam Sundar Kawang, Assistant Professor at Nepal Engineering College, and I'm involved for the World Day event in designing a tier temple. And the main idea behind this tier temple structure is to resemble the theme of the World Day, the nature and culture, in which we have got the idea from the traditional building technology. We are thinking to demonstrate our cultural attribute in front of all the world. So we have chosen a temple which is from the Changu Narayan area, where we still have the oldest temple in Nepal.
This is a site map of the Changu Narayan area, and then this map contains the area which is enlisted in the UNESCO World Heritage Site. There is around 350 houses now, but it is mentioned that during the medieval period, which dates back from 12th century till 17th century, there is some kind of inscription which is found, and it says that during that time Changu Narayan area was a metropolitan city which contains 700 houses in the center and 900 houses around. So it was a metropolitan city. It was the place where the population was very high. Actually now the renovation of the Kileshwor Mahadev temple has been started. It is not only the renovation of this Kileshwor Mahadev temple, but also the renovation of the overall monument zone of Changu Narayan area. My family have been living in this place. It's already 324 years. I'm Anish Bhatta. My family, they belongs to the one of the priests of the temple which is inside the temple courtyard, and we belongs to the priest family of the Kileshwor Mahadev temple.
In the pagoda style in Changu Narayan, there is only two temples. That is the Changu Narayan and Kileshwor Mahadev. That's Kileshwor Mahadev Shiva temple. Mahadev and Shiva is similar name. There is one pillar inside. Kileshwor means pillar. It's like a knot. This killer, that is the lock. This whole hill locked by that stone. That is the pillar. That's big pillar. Is the Shiva Linga. Yeah, that's called Kileshwor Mahadev.
र यो चाङ्गु नारायणको एउटा विशेषता के छ भने यसको स्ट्रक्चरमा जुन यो मन्दिर बनिएको छ, मन्दिरको जुन जग छ त्यो जग एउटै ढुङ्गाबाट बनिएको छ। एउटै ढुङ्गा, ठुलो ढुङ्गा, चारकुने ढुङ्गा, त्यही ढुङ्गामाथि नै यो मन्दिर बनाइएको छ। अनि यो मन्दिरको खास बलियो गरी बनाउनुको पछाडि के छ भनेदेखि यसमा भित्र ठुला ठुला काठको अग्राक काठको पिलरहरू राखिएको छ, स्तम्भहरू जुन एक अर्कामा जोडिएको लक भएर बनाइएको हुन्छ। यो स्टेप बाई स्टेप गरी बनाइएको हुन्छ र हरेक काठको जोडाइ मेन पिलरसँग सम्बन्धित हुन्छ। त्यसले गर्दाखेरि यो मन्दिर ठुलो भूकम्प आउँदाखेरि पनि इटाहरूको वालहरू खस्छ, तर यो मन्दिर ढलिहाल्दैन। अहिलेसम्म प्रामाणिक रूपमा हेर्दाखेरि अहिलेसम्म आएको जति पनि विनाशकाली भूकम्पहरू आए यो मन्दिर बने पश्चात त्यहाँदेखि अहिलेसम्म यो मन्दिर ढलेको छैन। अब काठका टुँडालहरू विभिन्न पछि जोडिएका चिजहरू खसे, तर मेन मन्दिरको स्ट्रक्चर चाहिँ ढलेको छैन। जसले चाङ्गु नारायणको लागि र हाम्रो देशको लागि के गरौँ भन्ने किसिमको सोच भएको व्यक्तिको हामीलाई आवश्यक थियो। र त्यति बेलामा हाम्रो एकजना सर हुनुहुन्छ, उहाँको एउटा प्रोजेक्ट छ यहाँ। त्यो प्रोजेक्ट को नाम चाहिँ वर्ल्ड हेरिटेज इन्भाइरोमेन्ट फाउन्डेसन हो। यसको चाहिँ नि चेयरम्यान हुनुहुन्छ मिस्टर Peter Jones Sandy.
This comes from a very early period of foundation, and it's beautiful. I mean, when I first came, I remember this, and this is a rest house for visitors. The result of the earthquake is that everyone's been storing what materials they were able to save, but it'll eventually all go, and this is an important sector in the beginning of the village. Changu Narayan is one of the 7 World Heritage Sites. The temple itself, the main temple, was built way back in the 7th century, I believe. Changu is probably the oldest. Certainly it has the oldest inscriptions up here. It's very, very popular as a pilgrimage center because Narayan is one of the most significant of the divinities, Vishnu. Changu is a derivation of the name of a tree, a species of tree called chap. We here would like to achieve a certain element of maintenance. There's been a lot of discussion as a result of this earthquake. Why did the buildings fall down? Why was it only a certain type of building that fell down? Why did this amazing temple only shed a few bricks during the earthquake? And these questions are very valid because you need to do a proper analysis, in fact. And when it comes down to why a lot of these buildings have failed, it's because they have not been properly maintained. And we set up a team of woodcarvers, and they began to understand the principles of repairing, maintaining the heritage by repairing it rather than throwing it away and doing something they think was better. I'm John Sanday, and I'm an architect. I specialize in the conservation of historic buildings, and I've been living and working here in Nepal for over 35 years. More British. And tara mo here basu ani mo half Kabata. Kathmandu. Oh. History, the significance of Changu was one of the reasons why I was very keen to work up here. It's one of the smallest of the World Heritage Sites in that it belongs basically to a village. So I was at the time working for a foundation in the US, the Global Heritage Fund, and they were very keen to try and establish a program here in Nepal, and I thought that this would have been an ideal opportunity because it really covered all the significant aspects of conserving, repairing, rehabilitation, re-establishing the community, helping the community. And I thought, well, here we are, this is an ideal project. The little temple, the Kileshwor temple, is a very important temple. It's the only Shiva temple here, and it's modeled on Pashupati. And it belongs to a family that are still here, the Bhatta, you've probably met them. And they are, they have been an enormous help in establishing the work that we're doing. The reason that it has survived the earthquakes is that you have a timber frame structure sitting on a natural bedrock foundation. And it was very interesting when we first came up, I first came up after the earthquake, that the temple, if you looked at it, you would see that all the brickwork on the corners had been damaged. And then I looked at the roof, the eaves of the roof, and they were exactly parallel. Not a single tile fell off the roof. And then I started thinking, and it was only then that I recalled the fact that it had this extraordinary foundation, and the movement had literally been that it had twisted. And as a result, the brickwork had been nudged off. But you'll see basically how the structure is created.
Earthquake in Nepal is not like one-time event. Larger earthquakes occurred every 80 years. The very important thing that we have to understand about this ancient technology, they have mastered in responding towards the earthquake. That is why we can still see many such temple structures which are still standing. We have a very good trend of our ancestors. They do have all this revitalization. They do have all of these restoration projects done by themselves. So they are not only naturally sustainable, but they are also sustainable socio-culturally. They have gone through many earthquakes, and they have made cities more vibrant through their own effort. So for this time, I would like to use my expertise in re-evoking these traditional skills and then the knowledge of restoration that they do already have. The only thing is that we are thinking to have a temple structure as a project. Temple structure as a project to demonstrate the technologies behind, to demonstrate how they use the natural element for their built-up spaces. Particularly for the methodology to get into this project is we started with a small literature review, kind of things of what temple does mean and what actually is deer temple in Kathmandu Valley. And after that, we went for some cases to observe in around Kathmandu Valley, like in Panoti, in Changu. So for this, we have after finishing the cases, we try to model it to prepare us a 3D model for these timber elements, whichever is being applied for these things is like in a 3D computer application. Since it is made up of a very integrated combination of these natural materials, the whole temple has a very unique kind of style to support the load and to respond to different natural circumstances like wind, like rain, and then earthquake and some other calamities too. So after the 3D modeling, maybe we will try to compare the original temple structure, its timber frame, and then with the new that we have prepared. And we would also try to differentiate what actually is different from these two, and then maybe we would also be able to seek some of the problems that went wrong.
And then this becomes the main foundation. This is repeated here. This timber comes down and sits on somehow in here, okay? Because you have a building, it's a structure, and everyone believes that the brickwork, like over here, is structural. But here we've proven it basically that it's not, because we've taken all the brickwork away. Well, what does the brickwork do, and why does everyone think that the brickwork is important? Well, the simple answer is that the brickwork is purely a fascia, a covering, and that the main structure of the temple is dependent on the timbers or the wood. I think it's very, very important that we've put together in 2 or 3 weeks from almost scratch a complete model, and everyone has learnt and will learn an enormous amount from it. The most important thing, I think, for any country, however poor or however rich it is that they have to appreciate the history, traditions, and often in places like Nepal, their religion of the past, in their country. One of the things that's so important is that it's teaching the young generation about their culture. Namaste. Tapai kaba dako. And I remember many times we've had lots of school children coming up, and I make a point of always going up and trying to talk or get an opportunity to talk to them. Kiwayo. They come up there, and I mean, I always ask them, who's been here before? Maybe one or two hands go up. You all know the name of the temple?
Changu Narayan.
You all know that? It's good. A lot of people come up here, they have no idea. Have you found out the name of the little temple here? It's very interesting. This little temple is a Pashupati, a Shiva temple. Yeah? The most important thing when you're doing a tour like this is to learn the reason you've come here. It's a learning experience, this, and it's really important for you to begin to understand that you're standing here in one of the oldest and most important, both historically and religious-wise, of all the temples in the Kathmandu Valley. And I think it's very, very important to provide the local people with basically a record of their past history. I mean, to be able to hand over Changu Narayan in a sound structural state, whether however poor or however rich it is that they have to appreciate the history, traditions, and often in places like Nepal, the religion of the past, in their country. When I first came out, there's a very famous architect, artisan in England called William Morris, and he was the great champion for conservation. And I remember going back to England because there's a society for the protection of ancient buildings, which is what William Morris set up. He's long dead. And I remember saying, well, here's a great opportunity. Why am I in Nepal? Because I've often seen or seemed to me like being the William Morris for Nepal. And I've been quoted on that many times, unfortunately. But it's something that people often say to me, oh, you're so lucky that you enjoy the work that you do. And I say, what? And I find that most people hate the work that they're doing. And I feel so sorry for them, actually. Dwaragat Das was a wonderful friend because he was very interested in two things. One was his religion. He was a very, very devout person. And the other was his heritage. And he and we got together because he knew I was working in the Hanumandoka and repairing wood carvings. And so he basically came over to try and poach one of my guys so that he could use him in his own business. And but I ended up a very close friend of his, and we used to spend a lot of time discussing both obviously the heritage side of it, and I managed to give him a couple of guys who worked in his atelier.
My father used to be working in the government, and when he was a young man, he was also a youth leader, and he was into bodybuilding and physical fitness. So during one of his morning joggings in Kathmandu city, he lived in the core center, just very, very close to the Darbar Square of Kathmandu. So he was ingrained and soaked in this culture. So this is in him. So when he was going on his jogging, he found some woodworkers, actually carpenters, that it was winter, so they had a little, we call it a muckle, you know, it's like in a little bowl where you make fire to keep yourself warm. So they had this in front of them and they were working on a wood. So when he looked closely, he saw it was a wooden pillar, a 15th century pillar, where they were sawing off the carved portion, which for them was not good wood, because that had no usage. But they were trying to salvage the wood, which is the inner, the solid part, to make window frames or whatever they were planning to make. So this carved, sliced off piece was for them, the only use they had was to keep themselves warm. So that was used as the firewood for them. That was the first visual contact that he saw. Disturbed him. He did not, maybe at that time, he was a young man, he didn't really realize the depth of it and the consequences of this, but it disturbed him. So he offered them to say, give me this old wood, I'll give you new wood. So that's how he started. So he decided and he realized that the traditional architecture, which the woodwork is the inherent composite of the architecture, was going to be destroyed because people did not know the value or did not have the usage of the traditional wood carving architecture that was slowly dying away. It was being replaced with modern art or cultural, architectural, cultural significances that were coming through the influences from the Western world.
I also spent many, many hours talking to him about religion, because he's a Hindu, and he kept on, he always used to refer to our God. And I challenged him, I said, what do you mean by our God? Well, he said, you have a Christian God, and he's up there basically, very simply, he said. He said, well, you know, both our gods are under probably one God. And that's why it's so important to begin to understand one another's approach to religion. And so we had many, many big discussions on religion and heritage. And I think, again, why does heritage exist? 90% of it's because of religion.
He took it upon himself to start then. He became conscious, so he then started consciously moving around the city. And he started seeing that all of this woodwork was going to be destroyed because people did not know the value. They didn't have, more than the value, they didn't have a usage of it anymore. So he took it upon himself to buy these pieces and start collecting them. There was a purpose behind to save it for the future generation, because he began to realize that the identity of the Nepali people was linked to this architecture.
Today, well, my arm was twisted yesterday by a group of people who were interested to actually learn about the work that we're doing, conservation. So a group of us have assembled here today to actually take a look at the original version of the Kileshwor temple. One of the points that we've been able to discuss today, which I'm very pleased, is that how we should treat the timber afterwards. And we had been advised by one of the local conservators that we should use linseed oil, and I'm happy to hear that we've now refined that description into saying that we should use a very highly refined linseed oil, and that we want to be very careful on the best way of applying it, because it could become sticky, it could take a long time to dry out. So obviously we'll do several tests. I was at the site, the symposium. I was very pleased to be able to come and join the symposium and to see the model of Kileshwor, the timber model. And I'm really very proud of the people that actually put it together, because you guys did a fantastic job organizing it, and the carpenters themselves were absolutely brilliant in that they got it all done in time.
This project it looks very simple. Looks very simple, but it was so comprehensive. Mostly the carpentry team who have made the project, which was already impossible, a possible project. They had completed that project within just a week. It had almost like 531 timber pieces, varying in sizes. It had 422 joints, which supported almost like 7 tons of timber. Those are all the typical, very hard and stubborn wood that we have in our country. Why we have chosen sal wood for this tier temple is because it is long lasting, and it has a very good characteristics of having flexibility when we have extra loads onto the building. Till now, this is like to make people aware of the traditional technology of using wood in order to make it more safe. In order to make them aware that the traditional technology is still good enough for earthquake resistance.
If we look around Nepal, that the industrialized, careless use of consumed materials of concrete, of various things, brick is everywhere. So I think this making of this timber pagoda in the traditional manner is to make aware to the general public that the material quality that used to exist in the traditional Nepal culture is something wonderful that they should try to sustain. In the whole promotion of wood is good. If we use this as an opportunity to be able to mobilize local craftsmen, help to activate a traditional craft that perhaps not as active now. And if this can relate to somehow for the post-earthquake reconstruction for the traditional architecture, including the pagoda or the tier temple, is how do we conserve forest? How do we make the use of wood sustainable?